Hello, and welcome to 99geek.ca, a book reading of Suburban Fantasy. This is chapter 3 of the book, for those who haven't been tuning in so far. This has been, I'm a writer, my name's Andrew Gatesy, and I write novels. My goal in life is to write for television, but I haven't quite ever been able to make it so far. So instead, I've been writing novels like they were TV shows, releasing a chapter a month as an episode on my Patreon page to my Patreon subscribers for just $1 a month. I've already got a lot of content on there, over 1,000 pages of content. It's not just one book. It's actually a whole bunch of different books. There's a vampire book, which is what we'll be hearing about tonight in season 0, I call it, before my Patreon started. Then this book continues on with a sequel. There's also a science fiction book about people on a dying world trying to find a new home. There is a fantasy book about a fallen angel who teams up with a lesbian thief who is trying to get revenge on the guild that betrayed her. There is also a spin-off to this vampire series that we'll be reading tonight called Dakota Slade, about a paranormal investigator who is investigating paranormal things. She's a lovelorn paranormal investigator. She's got issues with being lovelorn. There is also, finally, there is Isabel Tsung, Voice News, who is, she's a reporter, and she's trying to get a big scoop in Iraq, and there's that story going on. So there's 5 different stories, and I release a chapter a month. I cycle through them. So this month, now that we're in October, stop listening, Xbox, stupid. Now that we're in October, this month's story is going to be about the sci-fi setting, Adrift Homeless. But last month, the chapter I just released was Isabel Tsung, Voice News, and I think that was a great chapter. You can find it on patreon.com/99geek, or links to that at 99geek.ca. There's an excerpt on my blog, again, links at 99geek.ca. But absolutely, you should check it out. And if you enjoy this reading I'm about to do, I hope you subscribe to my Patreon, because just giving $1 would mean a lot. It would give me all the support in the world. And if you don't even have $1 to spare, you can always at least follow me on Twitter at Andrew Gatesy. That's AndrewGeeczy. Alright, let's start. A Suburban Fantasy, Chapter 3, Underage. Rachel awoke with a start. She opened one eye slowly to find that she was in a strange room on a... Oh yeah, I forgot to... Previously on A Suburban Fantasy. We should start with the previously on for those who haven't tuned in before. So, Rachel Lynn Smith is a teenage girl who is just a normal girl like anyone else. She likes video games. She's a total geek. She's an artist. She likes to draw. She likes comic books. She has a lot of geeky friends like Ian and Andrew and Bilal. And they all just hang out at their school, talk about geeky things, and argue with each other. It's all a good time. But she has struck up somewhat of a friendship with the cool girl in school, Tanya Dayton, who is also the student council president. And it's her birthday, and she's having a party, and she invites Rachel to the party. And Rachel goes to the party, and it's not a good time. No, not at all. She meets quite an imposing figure, an older man who seduces her using abilities somewhat beyond belief. And by staring into her eyes, he convinces her to give away her consent and her will, so to speak. And she follows him to his apartment, where very not good things happen. And that's where we begin now. So chapter 3, Underage. Now you can see how that title has a lot more deeper, dark connotations than last time when I said it. Alright, Underage. Rachel awoke with a start. She opened one eye slowly, to find that she was in a strange room on a strange bed and not wearing any clothes. She jumped from the bed and attempted to cover herself. The room was incredibly dark, and she couldn't see where on the floor her clothes might be, or if they were there at all. She felt like she'd awoken in a nightmare. "You didn't listen to me," said a familiar voice behind her. Rachel recognized the voice. "Thank God," she said with a sigh. "I am in a nightmare." There was a flash of lightning as Rachel turned around, and she was just able to make out Lily's features. There was something about her expression that wasn't quite right. Lily's blonde hair hung in strands in front of her face, concealing her eyes from further scrutiny. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked. "I should have expected as much." "Stop listening, stupid Xbox. I'm not talking to you. Stop listening. Stop listening." Jesus Christ. Are you okay?" Rachel asked. "I should have expected as much," Lily whispered, more to herself than to Rachel. Your whole life has led you to this point. Perhaps there is no escaping fate." Rachel tried to remember back to what happened before she'd fallen asleep. She'd gone to Toronto and met someone. "Who is he?" Rachel asked, as the rest of the night came back to her in flashes. "He's dangerous," Lily said with a growl. "Run for your life. Run to where you can be seen." There was another flash of lightning, but this time the walls and ceiling collapsed around them brick by brick. Lightning struck near Rachel and she jumped. Rain fell on her bare skin, making her shiver. It had gotten really cold, and she was starting to wish in this dream she had clothes. Lightning struck again, but this time it hit Lily square in the chest. Her body stiffened and her hair shimmered with electricity. As the light faded into darkness, Lily fell to her knees. "What's happening?" asked Rachel. Lily was still breathing heavily and didn't say anything for a few seconds. Finally, she looked to Rachel with a snarl and said, "You let the darkness in." Then she screamed, "Ah!" Ian's alarm went off. He didn't want to listen to it, and had meant to turn it off last night, but he forgot. He tried to ignore the groggy buzz in his ears and the sting in his eyes, but it was no use. He wasn't getting back to sleep, not when his body was so used to being up. On the bright side, he reasoned, maybe he'd be able to catch some cool Saturday morning cartoons. Forcing himself into the bathroom, he brushed his teeth and took his ritual morning shit. Still barely opening his eyes, he stumbled down the curving staircase and shuffled along the hallway tiles into the kitchen. His mother was surprisingly already up. She was in her robe, drinking tea by the table and watching the morning news on the small TV they kept on the counter. She was a plump Scottish woman with long brown hair and sunken blue eyes. People often told Ian that she had a strong Scottish accent, but he didn't hear it. "What are you doing up?" he asked her as he opened the fridge. Pushing the Coke aside, he reached past the pink stuff and grabbed the bottle of Sunny D. "Oh, Rachel's mom called us during the wee hours," she told him. "Was asking if we'd seen her girl since last night." "What?" Ian asked, his heart not literally lodging in his throat. "Why?" He took a swig of Sunny D, hoping it would wash away the sudden bad taste in his mouth. It did. Another victory for Sunny D. I haven't been sponsored by Sunny D, I swear. Let me just take a swig of this delicious Gatorade. Gatorade, also not a sponsor. Back to the Sunny D. "Alright, I dunno," his mother said. "I suppose she didn't turn in." "Did they say anything else?" Ian asked. "Did you even inquire at all?" Ian couldn't believe how calm his mom was being. His best friend was missing. Why didn't she wake him up? "I'm sorry, Ian," she said defensively. "'Twas early as all hell, and I was conked out." Fully awake now, Ian ran back up the stairs and grabbed his phone from his bedside table. Flipping it open, he texted Rachel. He said, "Where are you? Your parents are worried." Oh yes, this is more bad formatting. For some reason, my formatting got really messed up at some point after writing this thing, and now all of my electronic texts and chat things have been made horrible. Okay, so Ian Fletcher, his last name's Fletcher. Where are you? Your parents are worried, he texts. He then sent Mike and Jason a text. Ian Fletcher again. What happened last night? Where's Rachel? Pulling off his jammies, he slipped on some khaki cargo shorts with a dark green t-shirt. From his nightstand, he grabbed his wallet, keys, and Nintendo DS. He also grabbed his PSP from its charger. Again, this was written in 2014, a long time ago, before the Vita, before the death of the Vita. Alright, back to it. He also grabbed his PSP from its charger and fitted everything into their designated pockets. Checking his phone again, he saw that he had a message. Jason Stride. Dunno. Again, I gotta do that. He says, dunno, on his text. Ian Fletcher sends back, what do you mean, dunno? You were with her all night. Ian angrily flipped his phone closed and started back down the stairs. He felt his phone vibrating and pulled it out. Jason Stride, she disappeared last night. Just an N. He didn't punctuate it because he's a bad texter. He also misspelled disappeared. Ian Fletcher sent a face. It's like a smiley face, but it's more like an O face. And then he sent another face with the S. I don't know if you know what the S is, but he sent that. I'm just again fixing the text so it's at least in quotations and it's somewhat more legible, and then I don't have to update my Amazon page. Okay, so he sent two different smileys, a ooh smiley and a blah smiley, and then he said, we need to meet, with about 10 exclamation marks. Ian returned to the kitchen and took another swig of Sunny D. His mom got up from the table. What are you going at this time in the morning, Ian Fletcher? Ian rolled his eyes and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. He dropped it in another one of his pockets, best saved till later. After a moment's thought, he opened the cupboard and grabbed a number of granola bars. He had a pocket for them, too. Cargo shorts were great. I'm going to find out what happened to Rachel, he told his mother, after enduring as long as he could against her icy stare. He checked his phone and saw that he had another message. Damn vibrate. He almost never felt it go off. Jason Stride. Fine, meet me at Timmy's, 'cause Rents sold coffee maker when they realized I used more than them. He also misspelled like half of those words. I'm not going to tell you which ones. You're just going to have to read the book if you wanted to find out. Ian Fletcher then said, Kay, be there in 1 hour. I don't know why I gave them both the same voice there. I apologize. Right. He wanted an hour to quickly swing by Rachel's place before meeting Jason. He then sent another text to Andrew and Bilal. Ian Fletcher. We have an emergency. Code yellow situation. Might be code red. Meeting at Timmy's in 1 hour. Uh-oh, we need more Gatorade. Gatorade to the rescue. I feel like it's just thick enough to really make it worse. Check on with water. Alright. We're on page 81. We've read through 81 pages so far. Code green meant minor problem, not this chapter. The whole book, not the chapter. Okay, anyway. Code green meant minor problem like bombing a test. Code yellow was a little more serious, like putting a dent in your father's car. Code red was life-threatening. They never had to use code red before, but there was a first time for everything. Ian turned his phone off, silent mode, and slipped it into his pocket. He'd had his phone on vibrate so long he'd forgotten what his ringtone was. His mother was still watching him. You shouldn't get going. You shouldn't go getting in people's way, she warned him. If you cool your heels and wait for a few hours, I'm sure she'll turn up. Or maybe she won't, he told her angrily. For some reason, he had no want to hear her out. I'd rather be trying to find her than waiting at home for bad news. She crossed her arms. I'm just warning you, she said. And I warned Rachel, he refuted, but she didn't listen either. Thanks for being my mom, but I don't need you anymore. I got this. He left the kitchen and was about to put on his shoes when he realized he forgot something. He went back to the kitchen. Can I borrow $20? He asked. His mom grabbed her purse. I'll give you 60, she told him, just in case. She handed him 2 20s and 2 10s. Thanks, Mom, he said while pocketing the money and kissing her on the cheek. I love you, she said as he slipped on his shoes and opened the door. Love you too. Scene change. Scene change. Ian got to the coffee shop just as Jason was ordering at the counter. Squeezing past the line of like 30 people, Ian joined up with him. Jason was looking particularly pale behind dark sunglasses. Hey. Hey. Jason raised his hand. Not another word, he said, till I've drained at least half this cup. The girl behind the counter put Jason's drink on his tray and rang in the order. Ian immediately recognized her as that girl they'd seen behind the school that one time. Holly? She looked really tired. Jason handed her his money. So you work here? He said to her with a nod. Yeah, she said. What gave me away? She handed Jason his change. Listen, are either of you friends with Rachel and Smith? Ian nodded, his heart jumping in his chest. Yes, he said. Why, what do you know? Holly looked confused. I know she's late for her shift, Holly told them, and I can't leave until she shows up. Ian crossed his arms in disappointment. She's missing. Holly gave Ian a tired look. Don't you have to be gone 48 hours before being declared missing? I don't care, Ian told her. I'm declaring Rachel missing. Holly rubbed her eyes, and then her forehead. Ian thought he even saw her sway slightly. Okay, she nodded almost deliriously. Crap. She noticed him watching her and tried to smile. I'm sorry, I hope she turns up. She moved on to the next customer as Andrew joined them at the counter. He was wearing a black Superman t-shirt with a Kryptonian symbol for hope shown off like a crest of arms on his shield, unlike the shirt I'm wearing right now, which is a Captain America shirt with the crest of America on the shirt. Alright, I've completely lost my place. Okay, Kryptonian symbol of hope shown off like a crest of arms on a shield. He looked like he'd just stepped out of the shower, as his hair was still wet and wild. He was also out of breath, and had his satchel slung over his shoulder. This better have been important, he said. I jumped in the shower and ran straight here when I got the text. Ian was glad that at least Andrew took code yellow at the desired level of concern. Where are Bilal and Mike? He asked. Were you really expecting either of them to show? Jason asked. Mike hates waking up before noon. Bilal is a late sleeper too. They both need to practice more discipline. Yeah. Andrew suddenly noticed Holly. She was pouring a man's coffee from the pot near them. Hey, Holly, Andrew said in an accidentally creepy voice. Okay, let me try that one again. Hey, Holly. Holly pointed at him and thought for a moment. Andrew, right? Wow, he said. I'm not even wearing a name tag. Whenever Andrew tried talking to girls, for some reason, he always came off as creepy. Ian couldn't stand it. I gotta say, Andrew went on, you really make that uniform look good. Holly rolled her eyes with impatience. You should see me with some sleep. Ian had heard enough and cut in. I can't watch this anymore. Are we done? He asked Andrew. I feel like I've been standing here for a million years. She's busy, clearly feeding the rest of Canada. Why don't you come back later and creep her on her break? Ian's exaggeration about feeding the rest of Canada wasn't so far off. The line for the restaurant had grown outside the door and around the side of the building. Ian was just pleased as punch that he wasn't one of the people at the back of the line. The 3 boys found a table. Ian searched the crowd for Bilal or Mike. Should we wait for them? He asked. I wouldn't, Jason said. I think we should talk about what you did back there, Andrew told them. It was really hurtful to our friendship. When a bro is hitting on a chick, All other bros need to be supportive and help him look good. They definitely shouldn't cock block. Cock block? Ian repeated incredulously. Andrew, Rachel is missing. Andrew matched his gaze for a moment before saying, I really don't think we should be changing the subject yet. How would you feel if it were you? Andrew, shut up, Ian snapped. Jason, what the hell happened last night? We showed up at the bar, Jason said, and I split off to get a drink. Never saw her again the rest of the night. Andrew slapped his hand on the table. Wait, he said. Rachel is missing, like without a trace missing? Like she could be dead missing, said Jason to Andrew quickly before turning to Ian. I'm sorry, man, I messed up. I texted her, but she never replied. Jason and I assumed she'd gone home early. We were pretty drunk by then. I can't believe this is happening, Ian said, while his leg bounced impatiently under the table. He had a secret, something he never told anyone. He was in love with Rachel Lynn Smith. He wanted to scream it out loud, but he was scared what would happen if people found out. He knew it had to be love, because it physically hurt sometimes when he thought of her. He'd had a crush on her since grade 8, when he'd seen her doodling in her notebook. She'd been drawing a picture of Yoshi. He didn't tell her, but he still had the picture. He'd gotten it framed and hung it on his wall. He hadn't told her how he felt. He'd wanted to, for a while now. He'd just been waiting for the right moment. In his head, Ian couldn't help but imagine the world without her. Couldn't help. That's strange. In his head, Ian couldn't help but imagine the world without her. I don't know why he'd want to, but okay. He had to find her. Okay, because he's worried, I guess. He had to find her, and she had to be okay. Or else he had no idea what he would do. She was all he cared about in his life. Okay, look, said Andrew as he finally was ready to take charge. If we're going to find her, we'll need to go downtown and ask around at the bar, figure out where she might have gone after. Jason finished his coffee and set the cup on the table. I can help the operation, he told them. I can point out people I recognized from last night. Andrew pulled out his iPhone. Bilal just woke up, he told them as he read a text. Says he's going to make some posters. Remember the last time Bilal made posters? Jason said with a sneer. It had been when he ran against Tanya for president last year. His posters had all been photoshopped gags of him as a Power Ranger, Raptors player, or Ninja Turtle, using slogans like LeBron James wants you to vote for me, among others. If we take Bilal with us downtown, his mom will probably give us a ride to the Go, Andrew said while drumming his fingers excitedly on the table. Ian took a deep breath. That would be awesome, he said. Now that he had the group on Rachel's trail, he felt a little calmer. If anyone was going to find her, it would be them. Don't worry about it, Andrew told him. I've always thought I kind of channel the spirit of Sherlock Holmes, you know. He always enjoyed a good mystery. I bet this will be fun. Ian didn't say anything, but he really didn't expect to have much fun today. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Alright. They decided to stop by the comic book store before the bar. It was really Andrew who suggested it. It's world-renowned, he told them, and we would be committing a crime to pass and not go inside. Bilal was quick to agree with him, but Ian had the distinct impression that Bilal just wanted to get off the street. Ian knew what Bilal was feeling. They both felt uncomfortable downtown without any adults. They'd all heard the horror stories. Ian had no idea what could have convinced Rachel to come down here for a party, nor could he understand how Andrew and Jason could feel so comfortable walking these corrupt streets. Maybe Ian was overreacting. After all, they'd been in Toronto 20 minutes already and still hadn't been mugged. Maybe the city wasn't so bad. The comic book store wasn't what he had been expecting either. It was a warm and inviting little blue building, and the inside was filled with enough nerd memorabilia to keep the group of them interested for a day or more. But today wasn't a normal day. Ian studied a large figurine of Nightcrawler for a while, before realizing he really didn't care. He never thought the day would come when he'd be bored in a comic book store. He just wanted to find Rachel. He quickly showed Rachel's picture to the store clerk, who only shrugged helplessly. Ian watched as Bilal paced slowly around the store with disinterest, as the short Hispanic was never really into comic books. His gelled head kept turning to a young pale goth girl who was reading a comic book near Andrew. Bilal seemed to be throwing her disapproving looks. Ian had to wonder if maybe Bilal really didn't like girls, like how Rachel's brother used to think they were icky. Rachel's brother being Jacob. Ian wasn't at all surprised to see Andrew talking nonchalantly with the goth girl, nor was he surprised at the means she was willing to go to get rid of him. Having seen enough of Andrew making a fool of himself, Ian left the store and took a seat on a wooden platform at the side of the walkway. It didn't take long for Ian to regret leaving the store. The cold air enveloped him, and he drew his arms together to repress a shudder. The cold winds and the threatening thunderclouds in the sky weren't enough to keep people off the streets, as the sidewalks were as crowded as anyone would expect to find in a big city. Ian tried looking at the faces as they passed, but found that everyone might as well have been faceless. All these people had their own lives, and he didn't know a thing about any of them. Well, that wasn't exactly true. Ian immediately recognized Tanya's plain brown hair in a ponytail, even as she noticed him beside the comic store. She was wearing a black dress with a leather coat, looking very much as if she hadn't been home since yesterday. It was her makeup, for the most part, that gave her away. Some of it had cracked overnight, and her eyeliner had smudged to give her the appearance of a cheap hooker. Ian also has some questionable opinions of questionable narrative, okay? That's not me saying that she looks like a hooker, that's Ian in his mind's eye saying that she looks like a hooker. Okay, just so we're clear. Okay. Ian, right? She asked with a point of her finger. Ian tried to force a smile, but couldn't provide anything more than a wince. Unreliable narrative, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, what are you doing here? It appeared Tanya was about to ask him the same question. I stayed the night with a friend. He goes to Ryerson. Ian wasn't sure, but the way Tanya said friend made him think the guy was probably much more like a stranger. You're still dating that one guy? What was his name? He asked. Tanya pulled a cigarette pack from the purse that swung awkwardly at her arm and packed it against her palm. Scott, she suggested. We broke up last summer. Ian mocked horror as he asked, Cool hippie guitar playing Scott? Douchebag can't sing for shit, Scott, Tanya corrected. Impatient asshole cheated on me while I was at summer camp. She lit a smoke and let it hang in her mouth as she exhaled. She's too cool for school. I didn't say that, I just said that. Because I too am an unreliable narrator. Within an unreliable narrator. It's a very meta situation going on here. Alright. Ian grimaced both at the second-hand smoke as well as his own memories of summer camp. His parents felt he was spending too much time inside, so they'd sent him to a summer camp last summer. It's a lot of summer. It was the worst 2 weeks of his life. Ian knew he'd just finished telling his mom to stop sheltering him, but he didn't mean like that. Where's Rachel? Tanya asked. She motioned to the comic store. She in there? I thought you two were inseparable. She's missing, Ian told the school president solemnly. That didn't sound very solemn. She's missing, Ian told the school president solemnly. Her gaze snapped to his, as if magnetically, her blue eyes wide with surprise. No one has seen her since last night, he continued. Tanya covered her mouth with her hand, as she had a shocking realization. It's my fault, she said. Ian hadn't expected that reaction from her. What? He asked with surprise. How? It was my party, she told him with tears in her eyes. Ian rolled his eyes. That doesn't exactly make it your fault, he told her. Honestly, earlier that day, he had been blaming her for Rachel's disappearance. But having Tanya in front of him now, he realized putting the blame on her didn't seem quite right. We're trying to find her, he told her. Ian pulled Bilal's posters from one of his pockets and showed them to her. The top one had a picture of Rachel, taken from Bilal and Andrew's campaign video last year, with missing in large letters and Andrew's phone number underneath. When asked why Bilal used Andrew's phone number on the posters, He had told them he didn't want strangers calling his house. Noticing the lamppost across from him, Ian got up and pulled duct tape from a different pocket. He began taping a poster to the light while Tanya watched. "Can I help?" Tanya asked. Ian shook his head as he put the last strip of tape in place. "I know I'm not on student council, but I think I can tape a poster to a pole," Ian told her. Tanya laughed and explained, "Huh, I meant in general, like with finding Rachel." She offered Ian a smoke. Ian wanted to say no. After all, he'd never smoked once in his life. But he was all scared and stressed out about Rachel disappearing. Wasn't smoking what adults did when they were stressed? Oh man, he's so stressed. He accepted the cigarette and put it in his mouth. He reached for her lighter, but she didn't hand it to him. "You know that's backwards, right?" "Oh yeah," he said as he turned his smoke around. She leaned over and lit his cigarette. He took a deep breath with it, and immediately his lungs exploded with fire. He coughed and coughed and coughed, dropping his cigarette on the floor. "It takes some getting used to," she admitted to him. Ian wanted to say, "Never again," but he couldn't stop coughing. Suddenly his cough became something more, and he had to run behind the store to throw up. "Are you okay?" she asked as he came back. Wow, I'm actually kind of spinning from that coughing. She flicked her finished smoke away and continued, "No more cigarettes for Ian." "Definitely not," Ian said, still gasping for breath. "That shit is bad for you." Tanya nodded and said, "I'm going to quit." She didn't sound very convinced. The doors to the comic store opened, and Andrew came out with a large bag of books. He immediately recognized Tanya and grinned. "Well, hello there," he said to her. "Were you looking for me?" "You wish," she told him with a frown. "I did," he said as a matter of fact. "Last night on a falling star, and here you are, like magic." Ian ignored Andrew and approached Jason. He swung his arm, hitting Jason's camoed shoulder in greeting. "How far are we from the bar?" "Just around the corner," Jason told him. "Only 5 minutes away." Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. It wasn't until after 3 that they finally arrived at the bar. Ian couldn't even really remember what took them so long, though his stuffed belly was his most obvious reminder. They had passed a cheap Chinese buffet and decided as a group to have a large lunch. Well, he thought it had been a group decision, though Andrew may have influenced them a little by calling it a sign from God. Admittedly, the food was so good it might have been. When they finally arrived at the bar, it was like nothing he imagined. From the outside, it looked like a perfectly normal restaurant. There were tables outside, and people sitting around enjoying burgers and fries. "Those look like good burgers," Jason commented. He had a point. The burgers made Ian wish he hadn't eaten so much Chinese. Stepping inside, Ian was greeted with such dim lighting that he had to squint to make out the bartender. The only light came from the open windows and door, where the overcast sunlight streamed in as a blinding white. Ian's eyes gave him a headache, trying to adapt to both extremes. Jason leaned in towards Ian and gestured to the man wiping down the bar. "Same guy." Ian nodded in understanding and pulled Bilal's posters from his pocket. He handed them to Andrew and asked, "Can you and Tanya show these around, see if anyone recognizes the picture?" Andrew nodded and said, "We've got it covered." Tanya grabbed the pile from Andrew's hands. "Give me half," she said, "and I'll start on that side." Andrew held on tight and pulled them away. "I've got a better idea," he told her. "I doubt that," she told him with an air of exasperation. "What are you going to do, jump on a chair and yell at everyone?" Andrew stopped in surprise. "Yeah," he said defensively, "and it was my idea." Ian left them to their bickering, and moved with Jason towards the bar. "We'll talk to the bartender," he told Jason. "Ah, and I'll wait outside," said Bilal, looking very uncomfortable in the dark. "And risk you getting lost again?" asked Jason with a shake of his head. Not a chance, you're staying with us. Bilal followed them without any more questions, but one. Aha! Should I hold your hand? He asked bitterly. Jason and Ian ignored him, but two older gentlemen at the bar overheard his comment. Their stares were unsettling. Don't you ever get time off? Jason asked casually to the bartender as a man noticed him. You were here last night. You were here last night? He asked him with a casual smile. Jason nodded. I was. It's barely been 12 hours and you're still here. I actually have plans with my girlfriend tonight, he admitted to them. I get a guy in from Scarborough to work nights Saturday and Sunday and give me some time off. Ian couldn't help but notice Bilal. His eyes were wide, and it looked like he was physically shaking. Ian tried to ignore him and offered the bartender his hand. I'm Ian, he told the man. The bartender accepted his hand. Steve, he said. Steve was tall, with long, greasy brown hair and a little-to-no neck. Do you have a last name, Steve? Asked Jason, sounding a little too much like he was conducting an interrogation. Steve seemed to notice as well, putting down a glass he was drying and folding his beefy arms. Blasco, what are you kids in here for? He asked him curiously. Ah, we're underage, Bilal suddenly blurted. I only just turned 16 and I'm not supposed to be here. Please don't call my father. Ian couldn't believe how scared Bilal looked. For being brown, Ian almost felt Bilal was whiter than him. Maybe they should have let him wait outside after all. You're allowed in the bar, Steve told Bilal gruffly. You just can't drink anything with alcohol. Do you kids want something to eat? Ian pushed Bilal back a number of steps and smiled to Steve. Sorry for my friend, but we're fine, he apologized. We're looking for a girl. Her name is Rachel. He was going to say more, but he got distracted by the large tattoo on Steve's arm, in the shape of a giant two-handed sword. Steve only shrugged at him helplessly, but Jason took over. She's about 4'8", maybe 4'9", Jason told Steve. She's pale, kinda Asian. Wore a hat with ears. Steve nodded. Sure, she was here last night. Ian slapped his hand on the table excitedly. Do you remember if she left with anyone? He asked. Steve shrugged again. A lot of people come through here every night. Can I get your attention, please? Came Andrew's booming voice from the middle of the room. Ian was often surprised at how loud Andrew's voice could get. He was standing on a table, addressing everyone in the bar. My friends and I want to know if any of you might have seen a girl, especially if you were here last night. That's, when she went missing. Andrew showed around the poster to everyone watching him. Many looked upset for being disturbed. One man in his 40s was still wearing a safety helmet from work at a construction site and frowning up at Andrew from the bar. And was frowning up at Andrew from the bar. I should probably add that. Was. Just editing on the fly while doing an audiobook. This is totally very professional. Alright. Tanya sat at the table beneath Andrew and watched the teen embarrass himself with what seemed like satisfaction. Can't get no satisfaction, but she had satisfaction. Back to the story. Alright. Andrew gestured for her to join him, but she gave him a look that threatened physical violence. Steve was sending Andrew similar looks from behind the bar. Get down from there, the large man yelled at Andrew angrily. Andrew took one look at Steve's imposing figure and quickly did as he was told. Tanya shook her head and laughed. Ha 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 ha. The two of them joined Ian, Jason, and Bilal at the bar. Andrew gave Ian a shrug, but Ian wasn't ready to give up yet. Someone had followed Andrew and Tanya across the room. The man was in his 20s, and only slightly smaller than Ian. Admittedly, unlike Ian, the man's size was more muscle than fat. Ian took a step past Andrew and grabbed the posters from Andrew's hand as he passed. Have you seen this girl? Ian asked the man. The man grabbed the poster and looked at it for a few moments. Laughing, he yelled to his girlfriend, a bitchy-looking blonde with greasy hair. Ha 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 ha. Hey, Rosie, this is that girl. Ha 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 ha. Ian took the posters back. You were here last night, sir? He asked the man. Yeah, he said, and I've seen your girl. Rosie pointed her out, see? And she likes to hang at this bar some nights and look for the hoes. Ian found that he couldn't think of how to respond to the man. Looking around, the rest of them seemed as surprised as he was. I'm sorry, Ian said at last. Are you trying to imply that my good friend Rachel is a whore? It was the girl, all right, the man said with a grin. Last night, she went home with a feller in his 50s at least. Ian still didn't understand. The man at the bar wearing a hard hat joined in the conversation. I once dated a girl like that, he told them. My wife left me when she found out. That's a shocker, Tanya said sarcastically to the second man with a sick look on her face. How old was she? 15, the man told her. She was messed in the head, thought she was so mature and all the boys her age weren't good enough for her. So you took advantage of her? Ian asked. He had heard of girls being into older men. They probably had daddy issues or something, but Rachel didn't have any daddy issues. Ian couldn't think of one good reason why a girl his age would ever leave the bar with a man so much older than her. Ian felt as sick as Tanya looked. There must be some mistake, Ian said, turning to the man who had initially approached him. The man laughed. Listen, kid, you can believe me or not, but it don't change your girlfriend's being a slut. Everyone around him in the bar began laughing as well. Ha 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 ho 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 ho. Ian hadn't even thought about lashing out angrily, but lash out he did. His hand swung out, almost on its own, and slapped the man hard across the cheek. The man looked at him with such shock and anger, Ian didn't even notice that all the laughing around him had stopped quite abruptly. Suddenly Ian's nausea reached peak levels, and Ian keeled over to hurl on the ground on his feet. He didn't even realize that the man he'd hit had been in the process of striking back, and that the man's fist missed Ian completely to connect hard with Andrew's nose. Andrew doubled over with a loud expletive and a shriek that sounded far too feminine to have ever come from anyone with the Y chromosome. Everyone was so busy trying to find the source of Andrew's scream, not one person noticed the bartender pull a large samurai sword from under his counter and brandish it inches away from Jason's face. Holy shit, Steve, Jason said to the bartender in surprise and shock. No more fighting, he yelled at the group of them. I've trained for 5 years under a Xian fighting master, and I will cut you kids to shreds if you don't get the hell out of my bar. Silence had fallen on the bar as everyone watched with interest. There was a sudden loud blart, signaling the beginning of a phone's ringtone. Blaring loudly from some unknown source, the Pokemon theme played out in full as everyone looked around in confusion. Pokemon, gonna catch 'em all. Pokemon, oh, you're my best friend in a world you must defend. Let's start at the beginning. I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. Bam, 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 bam. Catch them is my real test. To train them is my cause. Continued to play as everyone looked on in confusion. I will travel across the land, searching far and wide. Straightening up, Ian wiped his mouth on his sleeve before realizing the noise was coming from his pocket. Catch them is my real test. To train them is my cause. Pokemon, gotta catch them all, it's you and me. You know it's my destiny. Pokemon, oh, you're my best friend in a world we must defend. Sorry, it's me, he said, wishing he'd left his phone on vibrate. Sorry, he said again, flipping his phone open. Maybe I'll take this outside. Steve was still brandishing his sword threateningly, but he nodded to Ian as if he thought that was a good idea. The group of them slowly backed out of the restaurant and didn't say a word until they were back on the street. Ian looked down at his phone and saw that he'd missed a call from his mom. Bilal sighed with relief and said, "Ah, I keep replaying that punch over and over again in my head, and all I can think is that it could have been me." Andrew was working with Jason to stop the bleeding from his nose, but shot Bilal an ugly look. "I'm alright, Bilal. It was just a freaking punch." Jason squeezed Jason squeezed Andrew's nose, and he made a wail that seemed to contradict his previous statement. "It's not even broken," Jason said in disappointment. Ian didn't understand why those guys were saying such horrible things about Rachel. But there was no way any of those things could have been true. Ian kept telling himself that, but part of him kept asking what if, and his stomach kept throwing up a little in his mouth. You all right?" Tanya asked Ian as he looked out at the horizon. The sun was starting to hide itself behind the buildings. The day was coming to a close, and they still hadn't found Rachel. "No," he told Tanya. "I don't..." He swallowed back his tears. I don't want to give up on her." As if to make his point, he crossed the street. Tanya crossed with him, and followed him towards the intersection. "I think we've done all we can," Tanya told him as she tried to match his pace. "She could be anywhere," Ian told Tanya as he stopped suddenly. "She could be in very serious danger, and I can't help her. I don't even know where to start. We've been at this for a day, and we're nowhere." Tanya looked at Ian as if she wasn't sure what to say. "Come here," she said, and she drew him into a hug. Andrew approached the two of them, and with the others just behind him. "Is this a group hug?" he asked them as casually as he could. Tanya broke from Ian and put her hand in Andrew's face angrily. "How's the nose?" she asked as he drew away in pain. So we heading back?" Jason asked as Ian came in range. Ian did one final sweep of the street in the vain hope that Rachel would come running through the crowd and jump happily into his arms. Which didn't do anything of the sort. Ian turned back to his friends and nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go home." Boo! Scene change. Boo! Scene change. Boo! Scene change. This is going to be a bit of narrative oversight. Or not narrative oversight, but narrative, sure, why not? Narrative, what's God? He is omniscience. This is going to be a bit of narrative omniscience. Alright. Ian was tragically unaware that at that very moment, Rachel was waking from her very long sleep in a green building only a couple blocks down the street. It took a moment for her to remember where she was. She knew she had just been having a very serious dream, but she couldn't for the life of her recall what it was about. She only then realized she was naked. Slipping from the bed, Rachel opened her eyes and looked around the floor for her underwear. Finding her panties, she slipped them on quietly and pondered as to what time it was. She could hear the noise from the street so loud that she knew it must have been rush hour. There was also a terrible smell. What could possibly be causing that smell? She opened the blinds around the window, to look outside, but as soon as the sun touched her skin, it was like she'd put her hand into living flame. She quickly jumped away from the window and found herself back on the bed without any recollection of how she'd gotten there. Looking at her hand, it didn't seem burned in any way, but she knew that the pain had been real. She never felt pain like it before. "I wouldn't do that again any time soon," said a familiar voice from the opposite corner of the room. As soon as he spoke, the entire events from last evening came pouring back in Rachel's mind. "And I wouldn't go outside if I were you for another 2 hours. "Eckhart," she said slowly, turning to him. She didn't understand what she'd seen in him last night. He was very old, with graying hair and a weathered face. He also had a very square jaw that smiled down on her now from the corner where he stood leaning casually against a long black cane. Her dreams started coming back to her as well, and quickly the final pieces fell into place. "You're a vampire," Rachel said accusingly, with a hint of surprise. Yes, Eckhart admitted calmly. And now, so are you. And that is the end of the chapter. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. That things are getting pretty intense at this point. And it's gonna just keep ramping up. I guarantee. Like, I keep getting better at writing, so that's gonna keep ramping up. And then, especially throughout this book, like once you get to my Patreon thing, I've kind of leveled out a little. I mean, I think every chapter is better than the last, but it's like this book is where I really figured out how to write books, and I figured out while I'm writing it. And I think this is where it starts to get good. I feel like that chapter is pretty damn good. For instance, you might notice that I tried to play with expectation. I'm sure people who are caught up will know that you were probably expecting Rachel throughout the whole chapter again, because it's been Rachel this whole time. And I want this book to be a variety of perspectives. It's not just Rachel's story. It's a shared narrative. It's you could say it's what's the word I'm looking for? Like an ensemble. It's an ensemble story. Most of my stories are ensembles. I don't like to just focus on one person. So, and this is kind of like, I didn't want to, like, throw everyone right in, like, here's 5 different perspectives all at once. So I kind of build up to that slowly, starting with Rachel, and then we got Ian. So we'll go back to Ian again, and then we'll slowly start dropping in a few more perspectives. And by the time we get to 99 Geek Season 1, which is Urban Fantasy Season 2, then you will see that perspectives galore. So, as I said, I'm building up into something, and I think it's pretty fantastic, personally, but I'm really biased, so what do I know? Next time on A Suburban Fantasy, that's Urban Fantasy Season 1, and 99 Geek Season 0. It's the chapter's called Then We Eat, which also has somewhat disturbing connotations. And it's gonna be, we're gonna get to experience things that we were hoping to experience this chapter, like Rachel's perspective and what happens now that things are messed up with her and Eckhart. So if you've enjoyed this chapter, I hope you have. Please check out 99geek.ca. There's links to all kinds of stuff on there. There's my blog, which includes a weekly TV blog where I review TV shows and rank them and talk about all kinds of geeky topics. There's also, I put excerpts of my latest chapters on there. But if you really are interested in reading more of my writing, you should probably subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/99geek. And on my Patreon, there's everything. I've got over 1,000 pages of content right now. Like, we're on page 83. So I'm telling you, this is just, we've not even scratched 10% of, which is probably not that exciting. Let's just say there was 1,000 pages of content at the end of Act 1, and now I'm getting into Act 2. I've probably written another 50 pages each chapter. There's 5 chapters. They weren't all 50 pages. Some of them didn't quite hit 50 pages. I mean, these aren't 50 pages. It's somewhere between 20 and 50 pages. So I would say I probably add another 150 pages to that. So we're probably at about 1,200 pages right now on the Patreon, and it's going to keep growing every single month by about 50 pages, 20 to 50 pages. I gotta stop exaggerating this. 20 to 50 pages every month. It's gonna grow. You can read it all. You get access to everything just by joining the Patreon. Just $1. If you join for $1, read it all. You're like, I'm good. You can unsubscribe. Subscribe again when there's a few months later when you're feeling better. Just subscribe to my Patreon if you don't have any money. I mean, subscribe to my Twitter if you don't have any money. That's at Andrew Gatesy, AndrewGeeczy. And my my Twitter is where I post virtually everything. I'm always live tweeting things. I'm always posting my mood, letting you know about all the latest things going on, letting you know how my writing's going, letting you know when my writing's out. It's all on Twitter. It's all on Patreon. It's all on at 99geek.ca. Just check it out. I could really use your help. I'm a really poor writer. I'm working a minimum wage job, working nights at Tim Hortons, kind of like Rachel and Smith. But I'm not a student. I have to pay the rent for this place. I live alone. I have OCD. I play a lot of video games. I probably own too many video games for the amount of money I have. That's my fault. I shouldn't have bought so many video games. So I've racked up quite a bit of debt, not just on video games. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, when you've got, say, $10,000 worth of debt and you're working full time and the Nintendo Switch comes out, you're not going to be like, well, I'll wait till I pay off my debt before I get the Nintendo Switch. I'm not saying that. So, I mean, am I to blame for my debt? I mean, I went to school, so some of it's school too. And living, which is hard. Am I to blame for living beyond my means? Maybe a little. I'm working on it. I'm trying to quit smoking. I'm trying to quit a lot of things. But I could really use some help. Because I'm so tired of working my night job. I've been working this night job at this Tim Hortons for 6 years. It's literally hell. You don't even imagine. And I could really use some help paying off my bills. And I could really use an audience. Because my writing's not going to take off if I don't have an audience. That's even more important than paying off my bills. Because if I don't have an audience, then I've got nothing. And this writing means the world to me. So, I hope I can convince you guys to subscribe to patreon.com/99geek. Until next time, this is Andrew Gatesy signing off. We are the 99%. Turn off.